into some of these other categories. It wasn't a service animal, it wasn't a police dog, but they felt either because of vague religious beliefs or other strongly held principles that they did not want to spay or neuter their dog. And again, our concern was that some of these might find a place at the court, and that we might have our entire scheme of mandatory spay and neuter overthrown because of this. And we felt that this was the lesser, if you will, of the evils. We wanted to make sure that our mandatory spay and neuter ordinance would be upheld in the event of the challenge, and it was.
I'm gonna, Dub and I have actually been emailing, because, but I haven't had a chance to look at what you sent me, so I'm gonna ask you to embarrass myself. Have there been any cases where a spay and neuter ordinance of the type that was being presented in the past was overturned based on due process concerns? And I say that because we regulate all sorts of things. We don't have a right to do anything we want. I understand the argument from other people that, hey, I have my pet in my home, I should be able to make that decision myself. But when we have animals in our shelters as a result of people's individual decisions that we have to either place or put down, I think there would probably be a really strong legal argument that a city is on firm footing making regulatory decisions like that.
In general, it is under the police powers, and that's what the court found. I am not aware of any challenge to any city that has a more restrictive spay and neuter ordinance where it was in fact challenged, and the court found that based on fewer exemptions, it would still be upheld. Part of our problem is there may be other cities that take all sorts of actions on all sorts of things, but it's generally the city of Los Angeles that draws the line.
If someone doesn't pay their fee, so if I have a breeding permit and I have for an animal, well, is a breeding permit animal specific or person specific? In other words, if I'm
it is animal.
Okay, so if I have one animal and I have a breeding permit for it and a $100 license and I have to pay that each year, if
you would have to pay the $100 plus the $235 every single year, whether or not you actually breed that animal. And if you have 3 intact animals that fall under the same thing, you multiply that 335 by 3, you're paying $1,000 a year.
And my question is, when I don't pay, what does the city do? Sends a notice of violation?
That question goes to the other end of this table.
They're in violation. What we do in all practicality, have to get back to you. We have to check with our Director of Field Operations.
Okay. No, that's, I would appreciate that.
I just write them
up. You got the easy job done.
Yes, sometimes.
Forgive my lack of knowledge, but if once, let's say they are breeding the animal, is there include them from them selling those animals?
No. We do have a transfer permit that is separate from the breeding permit, and as a matter of fact, Sue Taylor, who addressed you several times today, was the one that got the city to adopt this transfer permit, and I think it took her easily 7, 8, 9 years for the city to get around to that. But under the breeder's permit, it does allow the holder of the breeder's permit to also sell the puppies. If they are not the breeder, and part of it was, the transfer permit was also a way to buttress the breeder's permit, because what the department would find oftentimes is when they would try to bust someone for selling puppies, the answer would be, oh, that's not my dog who got the puppies, it was, I'm selling it for a friend who lives in Lancaster, and I'm just selling it for them, so therefore I didn't need a breeder's permit because ain't my dog. And And so the transfer permit was meant to stop that, so that you either had a transfer permit and paid for that, or you had a breeder's permit and paid for that, but either way, between those two, if somebody was selling puppies, the department would have a tool to make sure that there was a permit involved, and the permit in addition required that the person keep the animal in certain under certain conditions that would make sure that we didn't have sort of puppy mills in the city of Los Angeles.
So the breeder permit really isn't what it basically anybody can get it. You don't have to make any sort of showing that you're a professional breeder, and it applies to any dogs, including mixes, that traditionally are the subject of professional breeders.
Right.
Okay.
Bingo.
And what are the penalties if it appears to me, and I may be reading it wrong, that if someone has an animal that gives birth prior to having the breeding permit, that's okay, that there's no penalty for that?
Once again, I would have to defer to how the department enforces this. Arguably, you need to have the breeder's permit and the license before.
But it is theoretically possible that you could have a dog, have a whole litter, and then it be noticed, and then take the breeding permit without any additional penalty.
If the department accepts that, yes, or the department can choose to take the matter and turn it over to criminal prosecution, because it is a misdemeanor to have a litter in the city of Los Angeles without having a breeder permit.
I just
But
want to...
once again, I mean, there's also the practicalities of the court system and the criminal justice system, and the department has to make choices.
Right, which is one of the reasons why I raised the question of the penalty, because if there's a penalty that can be assessed, then that can theoretically pay for the extra field work and legwork that has to go into determining this. It also seems that under the law here in Section 3 that a breeding permit shall not be issued to a person who has failed to obtain appropriate licenses or permits for the animal for which the breeding permit is being sought. So I would assume, therefore, that if somebody has given birth to a litter without having sought the permit, that they would fall under this, and therefore they could be assessed a penalty.
Once again, yes, but I'm not sure how.
Right. I'd just like to suggest, I'm not exactly sure yet because I have yet to put anything on the agenda, but at some point I'd like to talk about the idea of assessing penalties for breaking rules and regulations to the point where we can use that money as a pool to hire more field agents and to actually ultimately have a greater protection for the public.
And we do have some of that on the license itself, but I think you are correct that we don't have a penalty if you do not get a breeder's permit before you breed your animal.
Do we know how many breeder permits have been issued?
We can get that information. I don't have that information in front of me.
It'd be important to know, and also if there's what the number of non-compliance is also.
And what options do we have in terms of penalties? I mean, do we have, I'd love to know what kind of penalties are out there and what we can avail ourselves of, and also the process of instilling them. You know, is it something that we can do, or do we have to go to the city council for it?
So two things. Number one, that would have to be done through the city council via an ordinance to amend the code. But secondly, at the same time, we have been working on an administrative citation enforcement ordinance that the city council has been dealing with now for a while. And this will, once it's finalized, give the department the opportunity to actually write administrative citations for scofflaws in a way that is probably much more efficient than bringing them to court.
And do we, and as a board, are we able to make recommendations to the city council, or is that?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, what you would be doing is through staff, having staff bring a report to you, or to have a discussion on an agendized item as to what you would like to see, and then that would be transmitted to the city council.
Yeah,
As a matter of fact, the city council, before it takes action on most animal-related things, likes to know that the matter came to you and that they have your input as well before they take final action on most of these matters.
In fact, the paragraph that you're citing, that was part of various changes that we made to the mandatory spay and neuter ordinance last year. You can see it was effective August 6, 2013. So we did change that. We did propose it to the commission. Commission approved this language in that particular paragraph, and we got it approved by city council and then effectuated through an ordinance.
It occurs to me if we, one idea for changing that, right now it says you can't get a permit if you fail to obtain a license permit for that animal. And you could also include that if you've been assessed a violation of an existing permit, that basically you can't get future permits for other animals. It's just a thought. I don't know if I totally agree with that. There may be unintended consequences, but one other thought I had is to changing the name from breeding permit to like the 14th Amendment permit, or the due process protection permit, because it just sounds, it doesn't look to me what it sounds like.
Right, and we have had over the last few years numerous conversations on the fact that it is uncomfortable having the breeder's permit being the vehicle as opposed to calling it something else when...
The life vitality preservation permit.
But at the time, this was done in a very quick manner, and the breeder's permit was really the only other avenue in existence to allow for this, if you will, the safety valve. But we all recognize, even at the time, that this was somewhat uncomfortable.
So my request for discussion of penalties and how that's been heard, or does that need to be voted on, or is that just?
You just tell them what you want.
And then ultimately, the staff would have to come back to you with a recommendation that you would then act on, and then this would be transmitted over to the city council.
I wonder first, we just wanted this discussion.
Yeah, discussion item. What's the deal with penalties?
Yeah, I think it's important to have our director of field operations come in and kind of weigh in on some of the questions. And then if the commission directs us to go back to the report, come up with follow-up recommendations to amend the municipal code, we can do that.
Because one of my real concerns is licensing, because it feels to me like if dogs are supposed to be licensed, then there's a lot more that I'd like us to do to make sure that they are. It's good for the public, it helps with spay and neuter, I mean, it's just across the board good.
Sure.
So, and a little bit of enforcement can go a long way, just knowing that a field officer is heading over to a dog park, that types of thing goes through the dog park very fast, and you can get a lot of compliance with little. At least that's my instinct on it, and it's been my anecdotal experience.
One question I have, but I'll just throw it out maybe for a future report back, is what was, after this was initially passed, what was the response? Did we see a lot of people applying for permits, or do we have a sense that people who wanted to keep their animals intact just kind of ignored this and went underground, so to speak? So I'd just be curious on some sort of report, if you feel like you can address it now, or else we could just do it.
No, I think that'd be part of our research, is to see the number of breeding permits since 2008. That can be part of the report back next week, so we can continue, 2 weeks, so we can further have that discussion, and then you may direct us to write a report to perhaps change the municipal code. But we will have that information for the next one.